In the summer of 1994, 3 children walked into the Glenridge community pool and were never seen again. Their towels were left on the chairs. Their shoes stayed by the gate. But no one saw them leave, and the lifeguard tower was empty. For 30 years, the investigation haunted a town that refused to talk until a city worker uncovered something sealed beneath the pool's filtration system, and the facts about what happened that day began to surface. If you're into cinematic true crime stories based on real disappearances, concealed rooms, and long-interred secrets, subscribe now and hit the bell. June 17, 1994. Location: Glenridge, Illinois. Glenridge Community Pool. The sun beat down on the white cement deck, baking the air in waves of chlorine and sunblock. Children shrieked with laughter, cannonballing into the deep end, their voices echoing off the blue-tiled walls. Moms sat beneath striped umbrellas with paperbacks and plastic cups of Diet Coke. Boom boxes played top 40 hits from beside the snack bar. Water splashed. Flip-flops smacked pavement. It was the first real day of summer, and nobody noticed when 3 children disappeared. No screams, no struggle, no chase, just gone. Their towels remained on the lounge chairs, still damp from their last swim. A pair of pink jelly sandals rested neatly by the diving board ladder. An empty Sprite can sat upright next to an unopened bag of sour straws. Someone would later say they saw the 3 kids playing Marco Polo in the shallow end. Another insisted they were last seen near the locker room, but the surveillance cameras were broken, and the logs didn't show who checked in or out, and the lifeguard tower empty. It had been empty all afternoon. The Glenridge Police Department searched the pool, drained it, scoured the filtration system. Nothing. Divers inspected the bottom tiles. Nothing. K-9 teams were brought in. Nothing. The locker rooms, crawl spaces, storage sheds, nothing. No footprints leaving the wet cement, no signs of a scuffle. No one had noticed the missing lifeguard until dusk, when the shadows grew long and the water cooled, and someone finally asked who was supposed to be watching the deep end. The answer: no one. There had been a last-minute staffing change, and the town had failed to reassign coverage. The oversight was interred in paperwork. The pool had never technically been supervised that day. The names of the missing children were printed in local papers, read aloud at town meetings, pinned to corkboards and convenience stores. Danny Cortez, Tyler Quinn, Mia Langford, ages 7, 9, and 8. All lived within walking distance of the pool. Disappeared without a sound. The investigation grew cold. The gate was padlocked that fall, the water drained, the tower removed. The town promised repairs, then quietly abandoned the facility altogether. Glenridge Pool became an eyesore, a scar, and by the early 2000s, a forgotten relic concealed behind overgrown hedges and rusting chain link until 2024, when a city work order to demolish the pool unearthed something no one was meant to find beneath the cement slabs of the pump room floor. Something sealed, something that didn't belong, something that would finally force Glenridge to remember what happened the day the lifeguard was never on duty. July 2, 2024. Location: Glenridge, Illinois. Glenridge Parks Department compound. The heat was already unbearable by 9 a.m. Connor Lom wiped the sweat from his brow with a gloved hand and squinted up at the half-buried skeleton of what used to be Glenridge's community pool. The cement basin, cracked and sun-faded, sat like a crumbling tomb in the middle of an overgrown lot. Rust streaked the walls. A single diving board frame leaned at an angle, stripped of its platform. "Still can't believe this place just sat here for 30 years, said Eli Moreno, kneeling beside the rusted hatch to the filtration room. He adjusted the angle of his pry bar. Whole town pretended it didn't exist. Connor grunted, pushing down on his own bar. The hatch let out a groan, metal scraping cement, and popped loose with a muffled clunk. A gust of trapped sour air hit them. "Smells like dead raccoons and wet pennies," Eli muttered. Connor nodded, but didn't laugh. This job was supposed to be easy. Cut up the cement, haul out the old machinery, prep the foundation for the town's new rec center. Standard demo work. But even he had to admit something about this place felt off. The stillness, the way the wind seemed to die when you stepped past the fence, the way no one in town wanted to talk about the old pool except to say, "Don't go in there." He stepped down the rusted ladder, boots thewing on each rung. The room below was cramped and dark. His flashlight flicked across dusty steel tanks, brittle PVC lines, and crumbling wall panels. At the far end, behind a stack of old chlorine drums, he spotted something odd, a slab of cement set lower than the floor around it. "Eli," he called, "get down here." The two of them knelt beside the slab. It looked newer than the rest of the floor. Square cut, clean edges, no rust stains. Someone had poured it deliberately. Connor ran a hand over the surface. A small metal ring jutted out from the center like a handle. He pulled. Nothing. "Help me," he said. Together, they yanked on the ring, grunting. It took a few seconds before the slab shifted, groaned, and cracked open with a sharp snap. Dust sprayed into the air as the slab tilted back, and then they saw it. A wooden hatch, oak, rotted but sealed, with heavy-duty bolts along each edge. It looked like a trapped door, but not original to the pool's design, not part of any blueprint they'd seen. Connor's voice was barely above a whisper. "What the hell is this?" There was a pause. Then Eli said, "This doesn't go in the report." Connor turned to him. "What?" "Whatever this is, it's not demo work. This is evidence or something. Call it in." Connor didn't respond right away. He just stared at the trap door. Something about it made his stomach twist. The bolts, the shape, the unnatural precision of it. Then he noticed the writing. Scrolled in black marker near the hinge was a series of letters and numbers. DCQTML, June 17th, 1994. Connor stood quickly, almost stumbling backward. He recognized the initials immediately. Everyone who'd grown up in Glenridge did. Danny Cortez, Quinn Tyler, Mia Langford, the three kids who disappeared from the pool in 1994. "Call it in," Connor said. "Right now." By the afternoon, the site was surrounded by yellow law enforcement tape. Detective Alana Vega leaned against her unmarked cruiser, squinting at the pool under the mid-morning sun. She'd been assigned to Glenridge only 2 years ago. Enough time to know the town hated talking about the pool. Enough time to learn the names of the missing kids, like local folklore. She ducked under the tape and met the site foreman near the hatch. "Show me." The foreman led her down. The wood was warped now, brittle and dusty, but the bolts remained intact. Vega ran a finger over the initials. "Was it locked?" she asked. Connor nodded. "Still is." Vega called in for a forensics unit, then turned back to the foreman. "No one touches it. Understand? Not until we have ground-penetrating radar and someone from missing persons on site." "What do you think's under there?" Eli asked. Vega looked at him. "I think we're about to dig up a secret this town tried real hard to forget." By the next morning, the hatch was open. 3 crates were removed from the sealed space below. Old mildew, damaged but still intact. Each one labeled with a name and a date. Inside, children's clothing, 3 sets, swimsuits, t-shirts, a friendship bracelet, a plastic watch, still ticking faintly, and in the bottom of the last box, a Polaroid, faded, grainy. It showed the inside of a small pink room, a mattress on the floor, a girl no older than 9, sitting cross-legged and smiling. Behind her, a whiteboard with tally marks, over 2,000 of them. One of the texts whispered. She was counting the days. Detective Vega said nothing, just stared at the photo and remembered something her predecessor once told her. We never uncovered bodies, only silence. July 3rd, 2024. Location: Glenridge, Illinois. Glenridge Police Department. Detective Alana Vega flipped the photograph between her fingers for the 5th time that morning. Each time she looked at it, something new caught her eye. The tangled hair of the girl, the way she sat too perfectly still, the pink paint peeling in the background, and those tally marks, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. She slid the photo into an evidence sleeve and clipped it to the whiteboard in the conference room, just above the names. Danny Cortez, Tyler Quinn, Mia Langford. Missing June 17, 1994. Glenridge Community Pool. 3 kids, no witnesses, no person of interest, no trace until now. She turned as the door creaked open. Deputy Marcus Given stepped in holding a slim manila folder. "You're going to want to see this," he said. The clothing from the crates came back. Lab confirmed matches to the original 1994 missing persons report. All 3 kids. Vega nodded grimly. Any blood number? But there was hair, all mitochondrial matched. Whoever packed those boxes handled the evidence with gloves. No fingerprints on anything. She rubbed her temple. It wasn't random. Nope. She walked over to the photo and tapped the whiteboard behind it. This wasn't a dump site. It was a chamber sealed, preserved, almost like she hesitated, like someone wanted it to be uncovered. Gibbons finished. Vega looked over, or like someone was afraid it would be. By noon, Vega stood outside the Glenridge Historical Records office. The building was a red brick left over from the 1940s, the kind of place that smelled like mildew and old paper. She was met by a volunteer clerk named Mary Ann, who wore orthopedic shoes and smelled faintly of lemon furniture polish. "You're looking for blueprints?" Mary Ann asked, adjusting her glasses. "Of the pool." "More specifically," Vega said, "of the original community center, before it was torn down and replaced by the Glenridge pool in 1980. Mary Ann shuffled to a filing drawer. "You're not the first person to ask about that pool. You know, back in the day after the kids went missing, a couple of reporters came snooping around here too. One of them even got fired. Small-town politics, if you ask me." Vega's interest sharpened. "What do you mean? The mayor at the time was Thomas R. Byrne, liked to keep things quiet, claimed the pool was a gift to the community. But folks used to whisper about the cost, how it came together so fast, who funded it. I always thought it felt hasty." She returned with a long, faded tube of blueprints. Vega rolled them out across the counter. At first glance, they looked normal. Pump room, locker areas, storage sheds. But then she saw it. A section of the filtration system marked with diagonal red lines. Access restricted, maintenance only. That part of the design wasn't present in the 1980 plans. It had been added over something else. "What's under this layer?" Vega asked. Mary Ann leaned closer. "That's the old sub was built. The records say it was sealed." When? Right after the building permit was approved. Vega narrowed her eyes. That's 1 year before the pool opened and 15 years before the kids disappeared. She folded the blueprints. "I need to know who had access to this design, who built it, who funded the construction." Mary Ann nodded. "I can pull the contractors and council records from '79. "Give me a day. Make it half a day," Vega said. "Someone went to a lot of trouble to bury this place, and they had 3 decades to make it disappear." That evening, Vega returned to her office. The sunset bled across the blinds, throwing amber light on the wall of evidence she'd assembled. Maps, missing person flyers, Polaroids, evidence bag photos. A knock at the door. It was Given again. "You got a minute?" She gestured for him to come in. He handed her a flash drive. This came from CSU. They digitized the Polaroid and ran enhancement filters. Vega plugged it in. The image loaded on her screen. She leaned in. The girl's face was clearer now, vacant, but smiling as if she'd been taught how. Behind her, faintly visible in the mirror's edge, was something else. A figure. Vega squinted. A man, face obscured but tall, lean, his reflection distorted by the mirror's curve, just far enough in the background to escape initial notice. Jesus, she whispered. We missed him. You think it's the abductor? Given asked. She nodded slowly. He took the picture himself and didn't even bother hiding. By the end of the day, Vega had a name, Charles Langford, Mia's father. He died in 1998. A stroke. Never considered a person of interest. No record, no interviews on file. Just a grieving parent who eventually remarried and moved 2 towns over before his death. But there it was on the original pool permit application from 1979. His signature. Charles Langford, site planner, Langford and Burris Architecture. The man who designed Glenridge Pool was the father of one of the missing children, and for the first time since she opened the investigation, Vega felt the ground shift under her feet. July 4th, 2024. Location, Glenridge, Illinois. Langford residence. Past, the Langford dwelling hadn't changed much since 1994. Same white siding, same cracked front steps, same yellow mailbox in the shape of a duck. The neighborhood around it had evolved. Solar panels, fresh pavement, cars with smart displays. But the dwelling sat untouched, like a fossilized piece of time no one wanted to dig up. Detective Vega stood on the porch, her badge clipped to her belt, waiting for the doorbell's echo to fade. A woman answered. Mid-30s, cautious eyes, no makeup, hair pulled back in a way that looked more survival than style. Julia Langford, Vega asked. Yes, I'm Detective Alana Vega, Glenridge PD. I need to ask you some questions about your sister. Julia's face fell. She didn't ask which sister. There had only ever been one. I thought this was over, she said, her voice flat. So did we. Inside, the dwelling smelled like lavender and old carpet. A window unit hummed in the background, struggling against the 4th of July heat. A television played muted fireworks from last year's celebration, static noise filling the silence between them. You were what, 12 when Mia went missing? Vega asked, settling into an armchair across from Julia. Almost 13, Julia said, arms folded. We were supposed to go to the pool together, but I bailed. Why? I was mad at her. She got into my nail polish, painted her stupid My Little Pony with it. I told her I wasn't taking her anywhere. Vega nodded gently. You've never spoken publicly about that day, or your father. Julia looked away. What's the point? Mia was gone. Dad was heartbroken. Mom stopped talking. Nothing I said would have mattered. Your father worked on the pool's original construction. I know. He didn't mention that to anyone after Mia went missing. Julia gave a weak laugh. My father didn't mention anything after Mia went missing. Vega hesitated, then laid a photo on the table, the enhanced Polaroid from the crate. Julia's hand shot to her mouth. That's her. Vega watched closely. Are you sure? Julia nodded. I'd know that hair anywhere. That's the nightgown she always wore. She called it her princess pajamas. Vega pointed to the reflection. Do you recognize the man? Julia squinted. Her lips parted, then closed again. I don't know. Could be Dad, but the hair's too dark. His was already turning gray by then. Is there any chance? Vega asked carefully. Your father knew where Mia was. Julia shook her head. Number he couldn't have. He barely functioned after she disappeared. He couldn't even finish sentences. He drank. He just disappeared inside himself. Vega studied her. Is it possible he was hiding something? Julia looked up, eyes sharp. What are you trying to say? That someone may have kept the children alive, at least for a time. Julia went pale. Alive? Vega nodded slowly. At least one of them. We uncovered a photo with tally marks. Thousands. It looks like she was counting the days. Julia stood abruptly, walked to the window, and stared out over the street. Fireworks cracked in the distance. Sparklers fizzled down the block. "My mom," she said finally, "used to say the worst thing about losing a child isn't the grief." Vega waited. It's the wondering every minute for the rest of your life. Where are they? Are they cold? Are they scared? Do they think you gave up? She turned back to Vega, eyes glassy. "If Mia was alive all that time and no one knew, you couldn't have known," Vega said quietly. "But we need everything you remember, even if it felt unimportant at the time." Julia sat again, shaking. "Okay." Ask. Later that night, back at the station, Vega reviewed the interview transcript. Julia had mentioned something offhand. A man her father used to meet with during the pool construction. A volunteer from the zoning board. Quiet. Always watching. Wore a suit to the pool site, she'd said. Even in summer. I remember because I thought he looked like a mortician. Given had already started running names, he popped his head into her office. "Got something?" Vega looked up. Glenridge Zoning Board, 1978 through 1982. One name overlaps with the pool permit, the filtration changes, and a separate construction grant application from a now defunct nonprofit called Family Forward Foundation. He handed her a printout. Name, Curtis Webb. Status living. Age 82. Last known address, Haven Pines Assisted Living Facility. Vega stood. "Let's go." They arrived just after 10 p.m. The staff let them into the secure wing. Late-night visits weren't standard, but a badge and a signature went a long way. Curtis Webb was awake, watching game shows with the volume too loud and the lights too dim. He looked up at them as they entered. "You're not my nurse," he said flatly. "No," Vega said. "We're here about Glenridge Pool, 1994. "Do you remember it?" His face changed. Just a flicker. But it was there. "I was just a volunteer," he said. "You were on the zoning board, and you helped approve modifications to the filtration room, the same room where we uncovered crates containing evidence from a missing persons investigation." Webb blinked. "I don't remember." Vega leaned forward. "The permit has your name. So does the non-profit that funded the subbase." Webb didn't answer. "Did Charles Langford build that room for Mia? Did you help?" Silence, then barely a whisper. "It wasn't just him." Vega froze. "What do you mean?" But Webb's eyes had glazed over. He looked past her into nothing. Given leaned in. "You okay, sir?" Webb's lips moved again. It was never just him. There were rules. Roles. Who else was involved? Vega demanded. Webb finally looked at her. Sharp. Lucid. "You think Glenridge forgot?" Glenridge didn't forget. Glenridge chose not to remember. July 5th, 2024. Location, Glenridge, Illinois. Glenridge. Police Department Detective Alana Vega didn't sleep. She sat in her office at 3:12 a.m., a mug of black coffee cooling beside her as she stared at the whiteboard. The phrase haunted her now. It wasn't just him. There were rules. Rolls Curtis Webb hadn't said another word after that. A nurse escorted him back to his room. His chart showed a history of early-stage dementia, but what Vega had seen in his eyes had been sharp, coherent, fearful. She jotted down the words, Family Forward Foundation, beneath the photos of the missing children, a nonprofit that dissolved in 1996. Tax records said it was created to support educational enrichment for high-potential youth. But almost all of its funding went into two buildings. A now-raised community youth center and Glenridge Pool, a place where 3 children disappeared under impossible circumstances. A place now linked to sealed chambers, coded initials, and a photo that had no right to exist. Vega flipped through the photos from the evidence boxes again. That last one, the Polaroid of the girl in the pink room, had a detail she hadn't seen the first time. The mattress, it was flanked by 2 other ones, Same sheets, same princess decor, same childish scale. There hadn't just been one child in that room. There had been 3. Later that morning, Vega and Given stood in front of the Glenridge Town Archives, requesting sealed personnel records from 1993 to 1994. You'll need a formal warrant for anything over 25 years old, the clerk said stiffly. Vega handed over the paperwork already signed. We need the seasonal staff list from the Parks Department, specifically pool employees. The clerk returned 10 minutes later with a thick binder and a smaller envelope. Vega flipped through it quickly. Pages of lifeguard schedules, maintenance logs, volunteer assignments. Then she stopped here. June 17, 1994. Staffing lifeguard Megan Drexler. Sick, not covered. Supervisor Curtis Webb, volunteer acting manager. There it was. Proof that no one had been watching the pool that day, but the name made her freeze. Megan Drexler. Vega recognized it from an old address record, one of the applicants for a local teaching job in the late 90s. She had disappeared shortly after, moved states, left no forwarding information. But Vega had an idea. She looked at Given. Run that name. See if anything ties her to Charles Langford. Family forward. Anything. Given was already typing. Hold on. Got something. She worked with Langford and Boris in the late 80s. Architectural assistant, no formal degree, but listed on the original renderings of the subbase structure. Find her, Vega said, wherever she is. By the afternoon, they had an address. Megan Drexler was living under her maiden name in a quiet neighborhood outside Rockford, a 90-minute drive. Vega took the lead. The woman who opened the door was pale, mid-50s, and looked like she hadn't slept well in years. She blinked twice at the badges, then stepped aside without a word. Inside, the air was still. Shades drawn. VHS tapes in neat rows along the wall, all labeled by hand. I knew it would come eventually, Megan said, sitting on the edge of her floral couch. I hoped I'd be dead first. Vega didn't sit. We uncovered the hatch, the crates, the photo. Megan's face crumpled. I never wanted to hurt them, she said quietly. But I was too scared to say anything. Say anything about what? Vega pressed. What was going on down there? Why were those kids in that room? Megan nodded toward the VHS shelves. It wasn't just Charles. He was the builder, but it was Webb's idea. He said it was a sanctuary, a place to protect purity. That's what they called it. Who else was involved? Megan's voice trembled. Dozens, men, some women. They held meetings, shared footage, called it the Fellowship. I thought it was just talk, ritual games, pageantry. But it wasn't. No, her voice broke. It was real. Vega walked to the VHS shelf, picked one. The label reads, Room Volume 188. Tyler compliant. Her stomach turned. Why didn't you stop them? Vega asked. Megan looked at her hands. I was 19, and they told me if I said anything, I'd be interred under that pool too. Back at the Glenridge station, Vega made a call to the State Task Force, Child Exploitation, and Organized Crime Division. She told them everything about the sub, the crates, the photo, the Fellowship. By midnight, they had a team en route because Vega had seen enough to know this wasn't just a missing persons investigation anymore. It was a system, one that lived beneath the surface, like a sealed room under a public pool, invisible unless you knew where to look, and someone in Glenridge still knew exactly where to look. July 6, 2024. Location, Glenridge, Illinois. Glenridge pool site. Sealed sub-dart. The smell hit first, coppery, sour, and thick. Detective Vega covered her mouth with her sleeve as the task force team pried up the last cement panel beneath what had once been the deep end. A newly uncovered second hatch beneath the first had been exposed by sonar earlier that morning. Unlike the wooden trapdoor above, this one was metal, reinforced, welded shut. Whoever had built it hadn't wanted it reopened, but they hadn't expected this kind of attention. The hatch groaned as it was cut open with an acetylene torch. The hiss of flame echoed under the cement. Sparks rained onto the wet tile. Then the lid lifted, and silence fell. Vega crouched beside the opening and shined her flashlight down. A metal staircase led into darkness. She descended first. The chamber was small, maybe 10 feet across, with rusted shelving lining the walls. Filing cabinets, sealed crates, and rows of outdated surveillance equipment. The air was cold despite the heat above, and her boots crunched on something brittle scattered across the floor. Glass slides, hundreds of them. She picked one up and held it to the beam of her light. A close-up of a child's face, eyes closed, a medical label in the corner. ML, subject, 3C. Maya Langford, Vega said softly. The entire room was a record archive, not just photos, but logs, measurements, physical samples, notes. The far wall held 3 thin cuts bolted into the cement, still made with faded princess sheets. Above them, hand-drawn calendars were marked off in different colored crayon. It wasn't just a prison. It had been a laboratory. Upstairs, forensic texts cataloged every item. The glass slides, they reported, weren't photographic. They were biopsy samples. Tissue, hair, blood. I think they were harvesting, one tech said grimly, tracking puberty, reproduction cycles, hormonal patterns. Vega felt her knees buckle slightly. They weren't just keeping them, she said. They were experimenting. By noon, the Glenridge Police Department was flooded with press inquiries, state agents, and forensic specialists. Vega didn't speak to the media. Not yet. Instead, she sat in the evidence review room, flipping through one of the notebooks recovered from the sub-notebook 4. CL, the handwriting was sharp and careful. Day 117. Mia continues to resist. Subject TQ shows early signs of bonding, but anxiety disrupts sleep cycle. DC bodily remains compliant under reward system. Photographic response has improved with reinforcement. Day 122. Minor bleeding during exam. Increase vitamin D dosage. Subjects no longer request going residence. Reintegration is unlikely. Subject DC asked if her parents were still in heaven. Day 134. Memory wipe trials continue. Subject TQ reacts violently to restraint, but calms when auditory exposure used. Rainfall cassette. Psychological dominance now measurable. This is working. Vega couldn't read anymore. She closed the notebook. Her hands shook. That evening she met Julia Langford again, this time in the interview room. Julia looked exhausted, her eyes bloodshot. "You uncovered her, didn't you?" she whispered. Vega nodded. "We uncovered where she was, but she's not there now." Julia flinched. "Then is she? We don't know yet." She pulled out the notebook. "But we know your father was part of it, and we know there were others." Julia sat in silence, then said quietly, "He used to vanish for hours. At night I thought it was grief or alcohol. I never asked. You couldn't have known." "But I did know," she said, tears welling up. "I just didn't want to. When I uncovered drawings in his office, I burned them. I told myself they weren't real, that I was imagining things. I was 16, and I thought maybe he was just sick. Maybe he didn't act on it." She shook her head. "I never imagined he built a place to keep them." By the end of the week, Vega received a call from the pathology lab. They had completed DNA testing on a blood sample from one of the CS. It wasn't Mia's or Danny's or Tyler's. It belonged to someone else entirely, a girl never listed as missing. No law enforcement report, no name, just a matching mitochondrial DNA profile. "Possibly a sibling," the lab tech said. "You should be looking for a 4th child." Vega hung up slowly. If there was a 4th deceased, someone had concealed her existence for 30 years, or she was still out there. July 7th, 2024. Location: Glenridge, Illinois. Glenridge Medical Records Annex. Decommissioned archive. The room smelled like mold and thyme. Detective Alana Vega stood beneath the flickering fluorescent light, watching dust swirl through the air like flakes of ash. The Glenridge Medical Annex had been decommissioned nearly 2 decades ago. Most records digitized, shredded, or lost in bureaucratic transfers. But some boxes remained, forgotten, locked in a back room under warped ceiling tiles and decades of silence. One of them had the words, "Forward Intake, 1993, scrolled on the side in fading marker. She opened it. Inside were thick manila envelopes, patient IDs, scans, growth charts. Some bore names Vega recognized, others didn't. One folder had no name at all, just the label subject for demitted May 21st, 1993. Released, Vega flipped it open. Age 6, sex female identifying marks. None siblings, DNA listed parental consent form. Signature illegible. Noted behaviors, withdrawn, repetitive verbal tics, does not answer to name. She turned the page. There was a photograph, a little girl sitting in a medical chair, long dark hair, blank stare. She wasn't smiling, but Vega recognized the sheet beneath her, the same pink and purple butterfly print as the sub-mattress. This girl had been in the room, and no one had ever filed a report about her vanishing. No missing persons investigation, no mention in any investigation. She disappeared without being missed. Back at the station, Vega laid out the 4 known children across the board. Danny Cortez, age 7, disappeared, June 17th, 1994. Tyler Quinn, age 9, same day. Mia Langford, age 8, same day, unknown female subject. 4D admitted 1993, 1 year earlier. Given sat beside her, flipping through the file Vega had just recovered. This kid was already there when the others arrived, he said. Vega nodded, which means the princess room wasn't built for those 3. It was already in use. They were added to it. Given looked up, then the original deceased 4D. She might still be alive. Or Vega said she's the only one who ever made it out. By midday, they had a new plan. Run a reverse lookup through CPS records. Children with no birth certificate, no known relatives, or questionable custody status. One match surfaced, a woman who filed emancipation papers at age 16 in 2003. No prior school record, no pediatric files before 1994, a blank slate before that date. Her name Sabrina Ellis. Age 37, current occupation in-home hospice care nurse, location Joliet, Illinois, 50 Ahmed South. Vega made the call herself. "Sabrina Ellis?" she asked when the voice answered. "This is Detective Alana Vega, Glenridge PD. I'd like to talk with you about something you may have experienced as a child." There was a long pause. Then a quiet voice said, "Is this about the room?" Vega's heart nearly stopped. "Yes." Another silence. "I was wondering when someone would find it," Sabrina said. "I'll talk, but not over the phone." That evening, Vega met her in a coffee shop just off year 55. Sabrina wore a long-sleeved cardigan despite the heat and kept glancing toward the door like someone expecting a ghost. "You were subject 4D, Vega said, sliding the photograph across the table. Sabrina nodded. "My name wasn't Sabrina back then. They called me number 4, sometimes just D. I didn't have a name until I gave myself one." "How did you escape?" Sabrina looked down at her coffee. "There was a woman," she said. "Not one of the men, not Charles. She worked in the room, fed us, took notes. But one day she came in shaking, said she couldn't do it anymore. She told me she was leaving the door unlocked, that I had to wait 20 minutes and then run." "And the others?" Vega asked. Sabrina's voice cracked. "They were asleep, sedated. They always gave us something at night. I tried to wake Danny. I remember shaking her, but she wouldn't move. Tears spilled down her face. I thought I could come back for them. I thought someone would believe me, but no one did. No one ever even asked. I walked into a shelter 3 towns away, told them I'd run away from a bad place. They believed me, gave me a new name, a new life, but I never forgot. Never. Vega reached into her folder and slid over the photo, the one of Mia sitting on the mattress, smiling blankly. Sabrina didn't look at it right away, but when she did, her face shattered. "That's Mia," she whispered. "Oh my God, she trailed off. "Do you remember anything else?" Vega asked gently. "Any names, routines, phrases?" Sabrina shook her head. There were cameras, red lights. Sometimes a man with a dog mask would come in. We weren't allowed to talk when he was there. She looked up, haunted. He smelled like pine cleaner and cigarettes. Vega jotted the phrase. "And there was one word," Sabrina added. It was on the wall, painted above the bed. I didn't know what it meant then, but I still remember it. "What word?" Sabrina's voice trembled. "Sanctum." That night, Vega called the state task force again. "Double your team," she told them. "This is bigger than anyone thought," because she knew now the fellowship wasn't a group, it was a network, and Glenridge was just one of the rooms. July 8, 2024. Location: Glenridge, Illinois. Glenridge Police Department Evidence Review Room. Detective Alana Vega stood in front of the large television monitor, her arms folded tight across her chest. The VHS tape inside the digitizer spun with a slow mechanical hum. A forensic tech hovered nearby, watching her face more than the screen. On the footage, a room Vega now knew too well. Pale pink walls, stuffed animals lined in a too-perfect row, a mattress barely big enough for a child. The camera angle never changed. It had been mounted in the ceiling. No sound, no timestamp, just grainy color muted footage. 3 children moved around the space, one curled on the bed, one pacing in the corner, and the third. Tyler stood at the small mirror, tracing tally marks on the wall with a dull red crayon. Vega leaned closer. He wasn't drawing randomly. He was counting. The mirror behind him caught his face, expressionless, robotic, but it also caught something else. A man reflected just outside the room, his figure partially obscured, but his outline visible. He was watching through a one-way window, not interacting, just observing. The forensic tech zoomed in. Vega whispered, "Can we enhance?" The tech nodded and ran the filter. The shape grew clearer. Tall, heavy-set, wide shoulders. The man held something in one hand. It took a moment for the AI software to register it, a clipboard, and attached to it a badge. Vega felt a jolt deep in her gut. The computer brought the image into sharper relief. Glenridge Police Department Auxiliary Unit. By noon, she had the name, Harold Hal Crenshaw. Retired officer. Served 1976 to 1999. Auxiliary supervisor for Glenridge PD, oversaw summer security rotations, including Parks Department liaison. No allegations, no complaints, but also no digital footprint, and he had volunteered during the entire 1994 summer session. Given brought over a printed photo from the department's old yearbook. Crenshaw's face was soft, fatherly, but his eyes didn't smile. This guy had access to the pool, the keys, the camera system. Given said he even approved the surveillance tech upgrade in '93. Guess where that funding came from? Family forward, Vega said. Exactly. And where is he now? Lives just outside of town on a farm. Retired quietly in 2000. Vega stared at the photo a moment longer. Get a warrant. The drive to Crenshaw's property took 40 minutes through fields, past silos, down roads that hadn't been repaved since before Y2K. His dwelling sat at the edge of a treeline, one-story vinyl siding, a porch with a wind chime that never moved. Vega and 2 agents approached slowly. No answer to the knock. They circled around back and uncovered a padlocked shed. The lock was new. Industrial grade. Vega's radio clicked. Unit 3, go ahead and breach the shed. Proceed with caution. A crowbar made quick work of the door. Inside, darkness, cobwebs, and dust. And in the center of the room, a wooden chest. Vega opened it. Inside, tapes labeled in shaky handwriting. PR Volume 251, Sanctum 11B, Subject 4D, Entry Log. Dozens, hundreds. Some VHS, some DVDs, some on flash drives, some on microfilm. She exhaled slowly. This is an archive. Another agent pointed to the wall. Photos were pinned there. Not of the missing children, of people in uniform, men, women, officers, judges, teachers, all marked with red dots beside their names. Some crossed out. Given whispered, "It's a ledger, a roster of fellowship members." Back at the station, Vega called in federal assistance. There were now 6 known children connected to the Glenridge pool chamber. Sabrina Ellis confirmed another girl had arrived shortly after her, possibly transferred from a different site, and yet only one survivor. The tapes in Crenshaw's archive were under review, but even from the first few minutes, the contents were beyond disturbing. Children filmed sleeping, eating, being tested. One video showed a man in a dog mask reading fairy tales aloud, while 2 girls sat cross-legged, hands folded, eyes wide. The title of the video, Obedience Session Tier 2. At 11:17 p.m., Vega returned to her office and uncovered an envelope on her desk. No return address. Inside a Polaroid, a girl maybe 10 years old, pale, hair damp, wrapped in a towel sitting beside a pool, a red rope around her ankle. She looked directly at the camera, on the back, written in sharp, tight script. The Glenridge 3 were just the beginning. As Vega stared at the photo long and hard, because this wasn't one of the 3 missing kids, and it wasn't Subject 4D, this was someone else, someone new. And the towel, it was branded Bayhurst Aquatic Complex, Michigan, July 29, 2024. Location, Glenridge, Illinois. Federal Command Post, Temporary HQ, Glenridge Elementary Gymnasium. The gymnasium floor was lined with folding tables, buzzing laptops, whiteboards, and screens. Glenridge Elementary hadn't hosted students since 2012. Budget cuts, mold, and declining enrollment. But now the building had a second life as a federal command post. Alana Vega stood in front of a digital map of the mudded West. Red pins marked known fellowship activity sites. Glenridge Pool, the relatives' forward headquarters, Curtis Webb's old residence, Crenshaw's farm. But now there was a new pin, Bayhurst Aquatic Complex, Bayhurst, Michigan. The girl in the Polaroid hadn't been recognized yet, but federal agents had pulled blueprints of the Bayhurst pool. Same architectural firm, same drainage room anomalies, same permit modification signed by a familiar name, Curtis Webb. He didn't just supervise Glenridge, Given said beside her. He consulted across 3 states. Vega nodded, and this wasn't just a sick secret concealed under one pool, it was an infrastructure. In the evidence tent outside, federal agents logged the Crenshaw tapes by hand. They'd uncovered over 400 labeled videos. Only 30 had been reviewed so far. Everyone contained either indoctrination sessions, surveillance logs, or testimonial videos, some narrated by fellowship members themselves. In one, a man sat behind a desk in a dark room, face partially obscured. He spoke clearly. "What we've created is a sanctuary, free from the filth of the modern world. We select only the purest. We keep them safe. We guide them to obedience, to understanding. We are not the sickness. We are the cure." The video was dated 1982, and beneath the screen, a logo Vega now recognized. Sanctum painted in the same script as the sub. By late afternoon, a positive ID came in on the girl from the Polaroid, Caitlin Ramos, aged 10, reported drowned in 2004 at Bayhurst Aquatic Complex, but no body had ever been recovered. Her file was closed as a presumed accident, the agent said. But get this, her mother filed a missing persons addendum the next day. She didn't believe the drowning story. No lifeguard had seen anything, but her addendum was deleted. Vega's eyes narrowed. Deleted by who? The agent shook his head. That part's gone. But the responding officer on the original report, he handed Vega a printed name. Lieutenant Harold Crenshaw, retired. Temporary summer assignment. Bayhurst, Michigan, 2004. Vega felt her stomach turn, so he was there, too. That night, Vega sat with Sabrina Ellis at the command post. She handed her the Polaroid. Sabrina held it delicately, studied the towel, the girl's blank, frightened eyes. "She looks like she's waiting," Sabrina whispered. "Waiting for a cue, that's what they trained us to do." Vega said nothing. She knew the signs now. The rigid posture, the frozen smile, the way the eyes locked onto the camera, but didn't seem to see it. "Do you think she's still alive?" Sabrina asked. "I don't know," Vega admitted, "but someone wants us to start looking." She pulled out the back of the photo again. The writing, the Glenridge 3 were just the beginning. She handed Sabrina a pen. "Does the handwriting look familiar?" Sabrina hesitated, then nodded slowly. "It's hers." "Whose?" Sabrina looked up, tears suddenly brimming. "Danny." By midnight, agents had reclassified the Glenridge pool investigation as part of a multi-state trafficking network operating from 1979 to at least 2007, potentially longer. Names were now connected to the fellowship through archived records, permit filings, and recovered footage. Of them still lived in Glenridge. Arrests began at dawn, July the 10th, 2024, 4:42 a.m. Vega sat in her car parked outside an old Victorian dwelling on Maple Hill Lane. She'd been here before too many times, but today felt different, because this was where Mia Langford had lived before she disappeared. And now there was a chance she was alive. Sabrina had said Danny's handwriting hadn't changed, which meant someone had taught her to write again, indoctrinated her, possibly conditioned her to believe she was dead to the world, possibly using her to spread the message. The Polaroid hadn't been a warning. It was a calling card. And Mia Langford, or what remained of her, might be the one sending them. July 10th, 2024. Location: Glenridge, Illinois. Langford residence attic crawl space. The attic smelled like cedar and rot. Julia Langford stood with her arms wrapped tightly around herself, eyes locked on the corner of the crawl space, where two federal agents pried at warped planks with crowbars. "I've cleaned this dwelling top to bottom," she said quietly. "I've never seen that hatch before." Vega knelt beside it. It was sealed from the inside. The wood creaked as the last board came free. Dust swirled. A narrow opening revealed a black void. Vega switched on her flashlight and crawled in. The space was tight, no more than 4 ft high, lined with old insulation and rusted nails. But against the far wall, behind a stack of yellowing newspapers, was a small metal lock box. She pulled it free and crawled back out. Inside were letters, hundreds of them neatly folded, carefully dated. The first was dated July 3rd, 1994, 2 weeks after the Glenridge 3 disappeared. The last one was June 12th, 2024, less than a month ago. They were all addressed the same way, to Mommy from Mia. Julia stared at the letters, as if they were radioactive. Oh my God. Vega opened the first one carefully. "Hi, Mommy. I'm not supposed to write, but the lady gave me paper. She says if I'm quiet and nice, I can keep writing. Tyler cries a lot. Danny doesn't talk. They say I shouldn't ask about you, but I think you're still out there. Sometimes I dream of our kitchen. I miss cereal. I miss Tuesday cartoons. I miss you. Love, Mia." Vega handed the letter to Julia, who read it with trembling fingers. "How did these get here?" she whispered. Vega was already checking the dates. They came every few weeks, uninterrupted, postmarked locally, but never mailed. Someone had been sneaking them into the attic. I think she's been coming back, Vega said. Julia's face twisted. Why would she do that? Because she never stopped thinking of this place as residence. The letters grew more lucid over time, less childlike, more structured, but their tone stayed the same. Quiet, desperate, full of longing. Mia described being moved to new sanctuaries. She spoke of tests, of assignments, and of earning privileges. Sometimes she described people only by their masks. Dogman, Ribbon Lady, the quiet ones. In one letter, she mentioned, "They say I'm the last successful one. They say I'm proof the system works. But I don't want to be proof. I want to be me again." But the most recent letter was different. It ended with, "I saw someone watching the pool site. Was it you? If it was, I forgive you for giving up. You didn't know. None of you knew. I'll try to come back soon. I don't want to die in their world." Vega stared at the postmark. June 12th, the demolition team uncovered the hatch 20 days later. Mia had been watching. Later that evening, Vega drove out to the perimeter of the Glenridge site, now cordoned off by Homeland Security. Floodlights illuminated the drained cement pit. Officers in hazmat gear moved like ghosts beneath the glare. Vega stood at the fence line and scanned the woods. Somewhere out there, Mia Langford was alive, 30 years old, raised in captivity, trained by predators, and possibly, just possibly, trying to undo the damage they'd done to her. If the Polaroid from Bayhurst had truly been sent by Danny, then that meant the Fellowship survivors weren't just hiding, they were communicating. Back at the station, Vega reviewed old observer files from 1994. One testimony stood out from a lifeguard who worked 2 days before the children disappeared. A part-timer, 16 years old at the time. Name, Elijah Voss. She tracked him to a residence in Wisconsin. He still lived under the same name. Given pulled his employment file. Guess where he worked after Glenridge? Vega already knew the answer. Bayhurst Aquatic Complex. Summer of 2004, the same year Caitlin Ramos disappeared. He's a transfer point. She said he's helping them move victims between sites. And if that's true, Gibbons said he's still part of the system. That night, Vega received a second envelope at the station. This time, no Polaroid, just a note. Typed simple one line. "You've opened the door, but can you live with what's behind it?" Below the text, 3 fingerprints in red ink. Child-sized, the message was clear. They weren't finished, and Mia Langford wasn't just watching. She was inviting Vega to follow. July 11th, 2024, Glenridge, Illinois, Glenridge PD Interrogation Room. Elijah Voss sat at the metal table, wrists chained to the ring bolt. His face was older, his once blonde hair gone gray at the temples, but his expression was calm. Too calm. Vega stared at him through the glass. "I don't know what you think I did," he said, "but I've worked with kids my whole life. Camps, swim lessons, lifeguard certification. I've got nothing to hide." Given flipped open a manila folder and slid it across the table, inside a still from one of the Glenridge tapes. A grainy image of Voss crouched beside a child's cut, placing a stuffed rabbit on her pillow. "You recognize this?" Gibbons asked. Voss didn't even blink. That could be anyone. Vega entered the room and placed the fingerprint match results in front of him. "You were at Glenridge. You were at Bayhurst. You were at Halverston Yenter in 2007. Same mask, different names, but always the same method." Voss leaned back. "You've got a theory, not proof." "I've got a survivor," Vega said. "Sabrina Ellis. She remembers your voice, For the first time, something flickered behind his eyes. "You think these kids remember?" he asked softly. "You think they knew what was being done?" "No," Vega said. "That's the worst part." In the observation room, the forensic analyst handed Vega a file. "We decrypted the flash drive from the Crenshaw tapes," she said. "There's a master list, not just names, rankings, roles." "Go on." "There's a designation called custodians." "Names. Voss is on it. Crenshaw Webb, but so is someone else." She flipped the screen. "Langford. Mia Tier 4 handler candidate status. Active." Vega's mouth went dry. That has to be wrong. She was a child deceased. The analyst looked grim. Not anymore. That night, Vega met Sabrina at the station and showed her the entry. Sabrina stared at the screen for a long time. She never wanted to hurt anyone. She whispered, "Not Danny. Not Tyler. She always tried to protect us." "Then why is she listed as active?" Vega asked. Sabrina shook her head. Maybe they changed her. Or maybe Vega said she's trying to burn them down from the inside. Just past midnight, a new video surfaced online, posted anonymously to a dark web forum flagged for child trafficking task forces. It showed the princess room empty. Then a voice, female, adult, calm. They thought this was a place of silence, a place of control, but the children remembered. I remembered. This is where obedience ends. Then fire. The mattress ignited. The curtains curled into flames. The stuffed animals blackened, their faces melting. "This is the last room. Let it burn." The video cut out. Vega watched it in stunned silence. "That's her," Sabrina whispered. "That's Mia." By sunrise, reports came in from Michigan. Bayhurst Aquatic Complex had burned to the ground. Arson, no injuries, no arrests. But in the ashes, firefighters uncovered a chain anchored to the floor of the drained kiddie pool. Attached to it, a red rope and a girl's jelly sandal, melted but intact. Forensics later confirmed the rope bore fingerprints. 3 distinct sets. One was Caitlin Ramos, one was Mia Langford, and the third, Alana Vega, from the envelope she had opened. Someone had planted her prints as a message. They weren't running anymore. They were pulling her in July 12, 2024. Location Chicago, Illinois, abandoned Family Forward Outreach Center. It was nearly 3 a.m. when the anonymous tip came in. Blocked number ducked. Female voice. One line. "She's ready to speak, but only to you." The location. A decommissioned Relatives Forward Outreach Center on the south side of Chicago. Closed in 2009. Condemned in 2017. No power, no surveillance. Vega arrived before sunrise, with a federal team staged a block away. She entered alone. The building's interior was gutted. Paint curled from the walls. Floorboards wept mildew. Dust clung to everything like ash after a fire, but one room remained intact. The walls were freshly painted pink. A small mattress sat in the corner. A single camera on a tripod faced the door. And in the center of the room, Mia Langford, now 38 years old, long hair tied back in a braid, worn clothes, bare feet. But her eyes, they still looked like the photo in the attic. She was holding a notebook. "Detective Vega," she said softly. "You know who I am?" Mia nodded. "I've been watching." Vega stepped forward slowly, heart pounding. No gun, no cuffs, just her voice. "We thought you were dead." "I was," Mia replied. "For a long time, but you came back." Mia looked down at the floor. "I never left." She handed Vega the notebook. Inside were lists, dates, names, locations, children, transfers, code phrases like obedience threshold, mirror protocol, and sanctum restoration cycle. At the end of the notebook, I was subject 7. They wanted me to be a mirror. I chose to be a blade. Vega looked up. Why now? Mia's eyes filled with tears. Because Danny didn't survive, and Tyler didn't die in that room. He died in me. I watched. I complied. And I wore the mask they gave me, A long silence. Then Mia added, "But I kept the mask, and now I wear it for them." Outside, the federal team moved in, but Mia didn't run. She sat on the mattress, hands folded, notebook beside her. "I have one request," she said to Vega. "Name it. Tell the world I wasn't the only one. Tell them the room still exists in others, concealed, obeying, waiting. And if you find another door like the one you uncovered, don't knock." "Why?" Maya looked her dead in the eyes, because the ones inside don't want to be rescued. As she was taken into custody, Vega glanced back at the room. The camera was still recording, red light blinking just like it had in the old tapes. But this time, the subject wasn't a child. It was the survivor. And behind her, scratched faintly into the wall, almost too light to see. "I remember everything," went 14th, 2024. Location: Glenridge, Illinois. Glenridge. Municipal courthouse. The courtroom was standing room only. Press lined the back wall. Local families filled the benches, and at the front, in an orange jumpsuit and restraints, Mia Langford sat between her federal public defenders. She didn't look at the crowd, didn't speak. But the judge read the allegations anyway. Obstruction, conspiracy, failure to report, unlawful confinement. And then, after a long pause, but in light of the evidence, the testimony, and the public cooperation that Miss Langford has provided in exposing a multi-state trafficking ring spanning over 4 decades, this court recognizes her not as a perpetrator, but as a conditioned asset, weaponized by a network of systemic abusers. Gasps echoed in the room. Vega exhaled slowly in the gallery. She already knew what the outcome would be. This court orders Mia Langford be remanded into federal observer protection under psychological supervision until such time as the Bureau deems her deprogrammed and no longer at risk of reactivation. The gavel came down. The courtroom erupted, but Mia never moved. Later that day, Vega stood beside the empty ruins of the Glenridge pool. The cement had been jackhammered apart. Below it, workers had uncovered not just one concealed chamber, but 3, each lined in pink insulation, each outfitted with a single light, a vent, and a camera. 2 were empty, but in the third, workers had uncovered the skeletal bodily remains of a child curled in the corner. DNA later confirmed to be Tyler Quinn. His final tally marks were still scratched into the wall. Vega stood in silence, hand on the crumbling cinder block, unable to breathe. It had taken 30 years to find him, and now she had to call his mother. Across the country, more tips began rolling in. Following Mia's testimony and Sabrina's interviews, federal investigators were dispatched to 8 states, 6 pools, 4 basements, 2 old school buildings, 1 private wellness ranch, and in each they uncovered evidence of the fellowship's presence, either abandoned chambers, unregistered medical supplies, or furniture consistent with princess rooms. It hadn't been a cult. It had been a system designed, funded, maintained, and interred beneath the places parents had once trusted. The next morning, a package arrived for Vega, no return address. Inside a stack of children's drawings, all done in red crayon. Crude portraits of girls and boys inside boxes. One showed a girl standing on top of a tower, holding a matchstick in one hand and a rabbit in the other. The caption read, "Obedience ends in fire." At the bottom of the envelope, a typed note. "The last sanctum has fallen. There are no more mirrors, just light." De Vega folded the paper carefully, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe it might be over. September 22nd, 2024. Location: Glenridge, Illinois. Memorial site: former pool grounds. The Glenridge pool was gone. In its place stood a memorial garden. Simple, quiet. A ring of white stone surrounded a bronze plaque mounted in the earth, in memory of the children who never surfaced. Mia, Tyler, Danny, Caitlin, and the others, still unnamed. You were seen. You were heard. You were never forgotten. Detective Alana Vega stood alone beneath the early autumn sky. The air smelled faintly of cut grass and new soil. She looked down at the plaque and traced a name with her fingertip. Maya. She'd been relocated again, somewhere out west now. No contact, no press, just sealed court transcripts and a lifetime of therapy ahead. But Vega still believed Mia had more to say. And one day, she'd say it. Across town, Sabrina Ellis walked the edge of Glenridge Lake with a black box in her hands. Inside, 3 Polaroids, a burned ribbon, a piece of chain, and a child's drawing labeled the room where we waited. She stepped to the water line and opened the lid. One by one, she dropped the items into the lake. She didn't say goodbye, just stood there until the last ripple disappeared. In a quiet suburban-attached structure in Kansas, a woman opened a drawer lined with cassette tapes, labeled only by dates. She selected one from 1989, pressed play. A child's voice echoed through the speaker. "My name is Danny. They said not to talk to the tape, but if anyone ever finds this, please tell my mom I wasn't bad. I just wanted to go residence." The woman, now in her 50s, closed her eyes, and for a moment, she wasn't alone in the room. And far beneath a shuttered aquatic center in another town, in another state, a cement hatch remained untouched for No.